Hello there, this is Justin Showers, the principal broker here at Home Basics Real Estate. Today we're going to have a conversation about the real estate purchase contract here in the state of Utah, otherwise known as REPC. Now, you probably, along with this video link, have an offer in front of you that we've just written on your behalf. If you don't have a copy of the real estate purchase contract, Google Utah Real Estate Purchase Contract and look for a link that says something like utah.realestate.gov/form so that you can bring up the right form and follow along. So the first thing we have here is the reference date, the date we make the offer, the name of the buyer, the name of the seller, and then earnest money. This is such an important part of this offer. We want good, strong earnest money because you're asking the seller to take the home off the market for 30 to 40 days so that you can get your ducks in a row and close on this. A couple things you want to know. First of all, the earnest money deposit is refundable as long as you are within the deadlines set forth in this contract. We're going to talk a lot about that. And the earnest money goes towards the purchase price. It's part of your down payment. Once we go under contract with the seller, you'll have 4 calendar days to get us that earnest money, and we need it. Otherwise, it could invalidate this contract. And we'll be on you. If we go under contract, we're going to send you some information on how to get that to us, how to do it. Okay. Section 1, we have the property address, tax ID number. Section 1.1 talks about included items. Things are intended to be included if they're attached. So if we have built-in appliances, we have light fixtures, curtain rods, things like that. I'll bring a couple of other things to your attention though. Solar panels would be included according to this contract, and so would TV mounting brackets. We have a lot of flat screens, and so the bracket, they'll take the TV obviously, but the bracket will stay on the wall, as well as wall and ceiling mounted speakers. Now a seller could exclude those specifically if they would like to. Section 1.2 talks about other included items we can negotiate for. So washers and dryers, refrigerators, microwave ovens. And sometimes that's how these negotiations go. We're negotiating back and forth for some of these minute details, right? There may be some other things that you like about the home or around the home, some personal property that the seller has. Perhaps they have a dining room table that's absolutely perfect for the space, and you would want to negotiate for that. We would use a different document for that. I'm going to caution you, it gets a little hairy there, so we don't love to do that. So let's be really careful on pursuing something like that. Section 1.3 talks about excluded items. Sometimes the seller has like an old hillbilly hot tub in the back, and you don't want that. So it would be excluded from the sale. They would have to remove that before they move out and deliver possession to you. Section 1.4, water shares are included, especially if they are the legal source for the seller's current culinary water. Section 2, let's talk about the purchase price. Now in our example today, we're going to write up a contract for $200,000, and we're going to assume as a buyer you have 5% down or a $10,000 down payment. Now in Section 2, this is an opportunity for us to spell out to the seller how you intend to do this deal. Now you're going to post $1,000 earnest money, for example. That would go on line 2.1a, okay? $1,000. Then you would arrange for a new loan, in this case a $190,000 loan with our loan officer. At closing, you'll bring the rest of your down payment of $9,000. So how does this total back up? $1,000 for earnest money, a new loan of $190,000, and then $9,000 is the rest of your down payment. That totals back to $200,000. Now any amounts shown may be adjusted as deemed necessary by buyer and the lender. You might come up with some different terms with your loan officer. Section 2.2, this is where a buyer would have to disclose if they need to sell a home before they could purchase this new home. And so a lot of buyers probably don't have anything to sell, but if you do have something to sell, then we would take out a subject to sale of buyer's property addendum, where we would tell the seller, yes, we have something that we need to get sold, and we would say it is listed or not, or we would also say it's under contract or not. So a good scenario, again, sellers don't love contingencies at all, but a good scenario is that, hey, the home's been listed, we have it under contract, and it will close before we have to close on your home, right? But we do need to disclose that now to the seller. Section 3, settlement, is when we go sign all the paperwork at the title company. And that takes about an hour as a buyer if you're getting a loan. Closing means that you've signed the paperwork at settlement, the prorations have been made on taxes, etc. The lender has wired the funds now to the title company. And there are a couple of things also that would happen if you're buying into a homeowners association. So the seller may have to keep the assessments current if there are any, or bring them current. And there might be, in Section 4.3c, there might be a change of ownership fee. And sometimes we can ask the seller to pay for those. But again, we're asking the sellers to pay for a lot of things. So really be careful of the net that you're offering to the seller. Super, super important. But I just want you to know, you're going to sign one day, a lot of things have to happen, and within about 24 hours it should fund and record down in the county at in your name, and that's when you would get possession. Backing up to section 3.3, it's when it has closed. So don't have your moving party lined up the moment you walk out of the title company. It's going to take about 24 hours. Section 5, this is who's representing who in the transaction, the agents that are involved. Section 6.1, the seller represents that they have title to the property. They'll convey it, a good, clear, clean title without mechanics, liens, or other encumbrances. And as evidence of that, they're going to give you, in section 6.2, a title insurance policy. And that's something that the seller will pay for. So if there's a problem with the title after closing, you would make a claim on your title insurance. Section 7, seller's disclosures. Think of this as a packet of information that the seller will prepare for you. They're going to fill out what's called a seller property condition disclosure. It's a 7-page document that asks them all about their ownership. Has the roof ever leaked? Have you had problems with your appliances, your furnace, air conditioner, whatever? They're going to fill that out, and they have to be as complete and honest as they possibly can on that. Along with the seller's disclosures, you're also going to get a lead-based paint disclosure if you're buying a home that was built pre-1978. You'll get a commitment for the title insurance. You'll get a copy of the codes, covenants, and restrictions in the neighborhood so that you'll know what you're buying into. You're going to get a copy of the most recent minutes, budget, and financial statement if you're buying into a homeowners association. You'll get a copy of any long-term or short-term lease agreements, any property management agreements. If you buy a home with a tenant in place and their lease doesn't expire until 2 months after closing, you have to honor that lease. You'll get evidence of any water rights. If the seller knows of any environmental problems or building or zoning code violations, they would need to bring that to your attention. So you'll take that packet of information and then begin your due diligence, which is section 8. This is the first contingency that you have in the contract. The buyer's obligation to purchase the property is conditioned upon the buyer's due diligence. Now, if you hire a home inspector, he's going to be up and down and side to side. He's going to be brutal, frankly. They're going to find all kinds of things. And you are allowed, if things just seem so overwhelming, you're allowed to get out of the contract and get your earnest money back, as long as we do so before the due diligence deadline in section 24. So we have to bring the items to the seller's attention and then negotiate a way going forward. Now, we could ask the seller to fix some things before closing. They could say no. We could ask them to reduce the price by $1,500 so that you can do it after closing. They could say no. They might have multiple offers on the table and somebody in a backup position. They might just say no. Sellers do not have to fix something for you. Section 8.2, appraisal condition. A home has to appraise for at least the purchase price. If it doesn't appraise for that, then we're going to have to go back to the negotiating table and see if we can get the sellers to come down. Once in a while we can. It's hard to solve a $20,000 low appraisal, but we can sometimes solve a $5,000 to $10,000 problem there. Section 8.3 says financing condition. If you have cash, it'd be no financing required. If you're going to take out a loan, which most people do, financing required. Now, if you're working with a great loan officer like our loan officer, you shouldn't have a problem, right? Sometimes though, the terms that you were qualified under, interest rates, closing costs, etc., change within that under contract period. So it says here, if buyer and buyer's sole discretion not satisfied with the terms and conditions of the loan, then the buyer may cancel the REPC. So if you don't like the terms of the loan, you can cancel. And as long as you do so before the financing and appraisal deadline, then you get your earnest money back. Section 8.4 talks about additional earnest money. If we need additional earnest money, then or if we need an extension on one of our deadlines, we're saying right now that we either will or will not pony up some additional earnest money. And I always say it will not. I don't want to pay for an extension unless they make us. Section 9, addenda. It's very common for us to have an addendum number 1, asking the seller to pay for your closing costs. Or if it's an FHA loan, you might have an FHA loan addendum. But this is how we go back and forth and negotiate through this contract, is the REPC and then the addenda to it. Section 10 talks about the home warranty. A 1-year home warranty plan will be included in this transaction. If included, the home warranty plan shall be ordered by the buyer, shall be issued by a company selected by the buyer. The cost of the home warranty shall not exceed $400, and it would be paid for at settlement by the seller. We can ask the seller to pay for a home warranty. Section 10.2, the property is sold in as-is condition. All that means is that you had a chance to evaluate and inspect the property, everything checked out, and if the furnace goes out 6 months down the road, you can't go back to the seller. Now, you just make a claim on your home warranty and you'd probably be taken care of. Section 10.3 encourages the seller to be extremely careful and very, very accurate in their disclosure because they can get in some trouble as well. Section 11, we can do walkthroughs anytime you want, but typically we'll do one final walkthrough right before closing. Sometimes we'll walk through the home and then head to the title company to settle on it. Section 12, changes during the transaction. The seller can't make any alterations or improvements to the property. They can't further financially encumber it by borrowing some money out of it. They can't make any leases. Section 13, authority of signers. We usually have a private buyer and a private seller, but once in a while we have a trust or a partnership or some kind of a corporation. We just need to round up the proper documentation there. Section 14, complete contract cannot be changed or, except for in writing and signed by all parties. Section 15, if there's a problem that arises between you and the seller, we may be able to work out around a common table. If that doesn't work, we'd go to mediation. Section 16, buyer default. If you have, if all of your deadlines have passed in this contract and you want to just back out of this, or you decide you're not going to close on it, well, you're going to lose your earnest money, and rightfully so. You've held the seller off the market for a long time, frankly, 30 to 40 days, and they may actually have a home under contract that they're wanting to buy, and they'll have to pull out of that. So it's a very big mess, and all they get is your earnest money. Now, if the seller decided not to sell in section 16.2, then they would give you your earnest money back plus an amount equal to it. Section 17, attorney's fees. If attorneys got involved in any kind of litigation or arbitration, the prevailing party would be entitled to those costs. Section 18, notices need to be in writing and signed by all parties. Section 19, no assignment. You can't tie this up and then have your buddy close on it or assign it to a friend or family. Section 20, insurance and risk of loss. You need to have insurance before you get the loan, so your loan officer will be hounding you on that. So you just call your insurance broker, arrange for the very, very best rate, and then tell your insurance broker to contact the loan officer, and they know exactly what they need to exchange there. Section 21, time is of the essence. If we gave the seller till 5 p.m. tomorrow to accept this offer, then they need to meet that deadline, and we need to meet the deadlines that they might have back to us. Section 20 talks about electronic transmissions. We do a lot of scanning and emailing, and certainly a lot of digital signatures. Those are still considered the originals. Section 23, acceptance. A seller can sign an offer, but it's not until they communicate back to us that we really have the acceptance. Okay? Here's that very important section 24 with all those deadlines. Now, we watch these like a hawk, and so should you. The seller disclosure deadline. The sellers have, typically we'll give them 7 days to gather all that information up for us. Section 24B, due diligence. We like to try to buy our buyers about 14 days. You'll have that much time to not only evaluate the home, but it's evaluating the schools, the neighborhood, etc. And if you feel comfortable, you move on to the financing appraisal. Your appraisal will come back. If you're working with a good quality loan officer, hopefully the financing is well in hand. It won't be complete by this deadline, which is typically 21 days to 25, 26 days, something like that, 3.5 weeks, that you'll have to have your get your financing really looking good and solid. If you're working with a great loan officer, we shouldn't have a problem there, and we'll proceed past that deadline. And then we go to settlement. Now, if the home is vacant, we can sell as soon as the loan is done. But if we put a hard deadline on there and the seller lives in the home, then we're probably just going to have to stick with that deadline. Section 25, this is where we would ask the seller to respond to us by 5 p.m. So this is the real estate purchase contract, along with any other addenda that we might incorporate into it as we negotiate back and forth. If we put an offer, we typically try to get an answer from the seller within 24 hours, and they may respond on an addendum, and we might counteroffer that and go back and forth. So as soon as we go under contract, we will provide you some additional steps, including what to do with the earnest money. If you have any questions, please let me know.